Welcome to the What Really Happened radio show. The history the government hopes you never learn. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
Yeah, aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It's Wednesday, April 13th, 2016, middle of the weekday, hump day, starting that long, slow glide down to Kaahumanu Friday and another hopefully restful weekend. I don't know. It's getting pretty intense out there. The chaos factor seems to be climbing and climbing and climbing. We have a lot of stuff to talk about on our show today. The phone lines are open, 877-300-7645. Tom is sitting in our control room, twiddling the dials, keeping us out of trouble and ready to answer the phone when you call on in. Well, I think getting right down to it, there's an interesting article at Blacklisted News. 2016, the year the Americans found out our elections are rigged. And yeah, at this point, it's pretty obvious what's going on. And I don't care what the head of the GOP says, where he's out there saying, well, you've known how the process works. Yeah, we know how the process works. It's designed to totally disenfranchise ordinary voters. It's party politics, like the old Soviet Union. The fact that we have two parties instead of one doesn't mean that we're not in as much trouble as the Soviet Union was. But between the massive election fraud, the delegate conflict, the voter suppression, the electronic machines, yeah, it's a completely corrupted, fraudulent system. And again, I maintain that if a government cannot prove beyond all doubt the accuracy, honesty, and fairness of the elections by which they claim authority over us, then we the people are neither legally nor morally obligated to obey that government, to pay its bills, and certainly not sacrifice life and limb of our children in that government's endless wars of conquest. Now, there's another article that came out of Op-Ed News. Darned emails, actually they're darning emails. I'm having to change the words here because I don't want the FCC to come down on our on-air affiliates, because even though the U.S. government may be dropping white-hot flaming death on innocent people all around the world, we're not allowed to use bad language on the radio to prove that we are a just and moral people. So just keep that in mind when you hear me playing with these euphemisms. So this article goes on basically about how everybody was proud about Bernie Sanders when he just wrote off the whole email issue during the first Democratic debate. And he may have been trying to take the high ground, or he's already made a deal. But it is the issue that could give him the nomination. So there's this article written by a former postal employee who's familiar with the Code of Federal Regulations that governs the employees of the federal government and the United States Code on handling of classified information. And he goes down this very long list, very detailed, of all the mistakes, malfeasances, and outright crimes committed by Hillary Clinton with her private little email server. And more of these articles are coming out over at RINF.com. They have another one, the 3 U.S. criminal laws Hillary broke with her email. And they're focusing on Title 18. And we know that Hillary violated Title 18, Section 793, with that email sent to a subordinate saying, strip off the classification headers and send me the document non-secure. And it doesn't matter why she did it, and it doesn't matter what was in the document. It's a felony violation. And under Title 18, if you are violating any of those provisions, you are banned from holding public office. Now, of course, Obama has stepped in and made this a political issue by saying, well, there's classified and then there's classified, and it really wasn't all that important. And then he turns around and he says, absolutely, the White House will not interfere with the Department of Justice. The two statements don't go together. If he's out there on TV trying to defend Hillary Clinton, and he's already officially denying that there'll be any influence by the White House on the Department of Justice, the two don't go together. And, of course, he's going to deny influence because that would be obstruction of justice, and that's an impeachable offense. Now, there's another article that came out over at the Wall Street Journal, no less, and they're finally getting around to asking a question that I asked when this whole email scandal first erupted. The job of Secretary of State does involve the sending and receiving of classified information. Hillary was saying all along there was no classified information on her private email server. So what server did she use for the classified information? Because she didn't have a government-issued email address. She wasn't using the desktop set up for her at the Department of State. She was using her BlackBerry and her iPad and all the rest of that. And it's very clearly a serious inconsistency with her story. And we are still hearing that Hillary Clinton's supporters are lobbying Obama to grant a preemptive pardon. So they can just put the issue behind them and say, it's been pardoned, the investigation is over, we don't need to worry about this anymore. Well, that may keep Hillary out of legal jeopardy, but politics is perception. And from the voters' point of view, a presidential pardon of Hillary is just as damaging as an actual indictment because it screams, there's a cover-up going on. So they must be getting nervous over there. All right, we're going to go ahead and grab ourselves a phone call from Alan in California. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind? Alan, are you there? Alan? Going once? Going twice?
Mike.
Yes, you're there.
Michael.
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes,
can you hear me now?
I can hear you now.
Okay. Yeah, I was calling, with all the corruption going on with this, against Trump and, Colorado and other states, it looks like it's time for, I know you're against it, but maybe a military coup to take, to get these, corrupt, demons out of, office here.
Well, what I'm really opposed to is a violent revolution in the streets of America because the wrong people are going to be killed. But most rank-and-file military I know are as ardent constitutionalists as I am. And at this point, I'm willing to entertain the possibility that the military cleaning out Sodom on the Potomac is an idea we might not want to dismiss totally out of hand. Of course, we risk, military junta and dictatorship. But, something has to change. We cannot continue down the path we're on right now. The nation is headed for absolute destruction with a little side trip into a nuclear world war along the way. And I think we'd like to all perhaps avoid that part.
Yeah, and these, Hillary supporters, they must not be doing their homework and, seeing what's going on with her. And, a lot of them are Hispanic and, blacks that are on her side. And, a lot of them, a good percentage, I would say about 80% are, Christians and stuff. And, I don't think they know that she's willing to abort a baby like a week before it's due.
Well, there's a lot of issues out there. I don't think Hillary's real grassroots support is as large as they're trying to pretend. Because if you look at the photos of Donald Trump's events, there's sellout crowds in sports arenas, the same thing with Bernie Sanders. There have been Hillary events where they're having the Hillary staffers stand behind her to try and look like there's people there. And if she's planning on stealing the election, then she has to create the propaganda to make it plausible that she won it legitimately by rigging the various polls and getting the newspapers to go along with it. I don't think her support is really there. I have this Hillary for Prison T-shirt, and I wear it all around Hawaii here. I don't wear it on the show because people were confused because of the camera. They thought I was a Hillary supporter, which I am not. But, these days, everywhere I wear that shirt, Hillary for Prison, people are applauding and saying, yes, they want selfies taken with me. And it's very intense out here. I don't think Hillary really has that much support. Now, she has some. She has a lot of support from the illegal immigrant community who technically should not be allowed to vote, but they think Hillary's going to give it to them. Hillary still has a portion of the vagina vote that they have been courting. She's losing her base among the black population, especially with Bill Clinton unable to keep his mouth shut. And right. I don't think, let's be honest. Hillary has lost 8 of the last 9 primaries to Bernie Sanders. If it weren't for the superdelegates, everybody would be saying, this is a horse race. Sanders is winning. Hillary's in the middle of a losing streak.
Yeah, she's just willing to do whatever, Trilateral Commission and all the others.
Oh, that's it. She's already back over sucking up to Israel. Oh, my support for Israel is eternal and it's personal and I will do what Israel says. Okay, move to Tel Aviv, run for the Knesset. We need leaders in this country who are going to put America first. Not the rest of the world, certainly not Israel. We'll be right back. Thank you for the phone call.
Thanks, Mike.
And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Now, we all here out in the real world understand that the corporate media is subject to biases, prejudices, agendas. They're all buddy-buddy with the rulers, and they want to do favors because then they get to ride on Air Force One. But sometimes it gets really obvious what's going on. And according to this story coming out of Daily Caller, CNN's objectivity regarding Hillary Clinton's email scandal is now in question because David Gregory, who's a commentator on CNN, is the husband of Beth Wilkinson, who's the attorney representing 4 of Hillary Clinton's former State Department staffers. We need to look at that link when we analyze the accuracy and fairness of the CNN reporting here. Now, here's something very troubling, and I put this in the category of a Bex alert. This is coming out of the New York Post, where apparently ISIS has put out a hit list targeting moderate Muslims, including top Hillary Clinton aide Huma Abedin, in its magazine Dabiq. Now, I think all of these ISIS magazines are just part of the propaganda. My concern is Huma Abedin knows the dark secrets of Hillary Clinton. And if you go back and you look at that Clinton body count list, you will find out people in possession of the secrets have very short life expectancies, sky-high life insurance premiums. And so I hope we are not seeing a propaganda run-up for Ms. Abedin to meet an untimely end just before she's due to testify under oath. And ISIS will be set up to take the blame, because it has happened before. I should repost that dead bodies list to the front page of What Really Happened so you newcomers understand what I'm talking about. Boy, we got a lot of phone calls out here. Let's grab Linda in Rhode Island. Linda, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. Just a couple of things to let you know what's going on over here in New England.
Yes.
I've been hearing that Providence College, Rhode Island College, Brown University, all those cry bullies, they're going to be out on 95 stopping anybody plus Trump from coming into a rally. He was supposed to come tomorrow, but now they're saying a week from Tuesday. I don't know. That's one thing. The other thing is my husband, of course, takes the same route to work every day. He works in Attleboro, Massachusetts. We live here in Burrowville. And he went to work Friday, okay. Saturday he went to work, which he normally doesn't. And there's a billboard up that says, we give Israel $10 million a day. Why can't we use that for our own children? So now on Monday, he said, well, I'm going to go to work Monday, and I'm bringing my camera. I'm going to take a picture for you. He goes there. The billboard is gone.
Yes. Yes, that's happening all over the country where Israel's minions are bringing financial pressure or threats of lawsuits against any advertising company that carries these ads. And these are legitimate contracts. The people putting up these billboards and ads are simply buying advertising space. And the billboards will go up, and everybody, starts, oh, it's anti-Semitic to talk about the U.S.'s liberty. It's anti-Semitic to threaten the money coming to Israel. And these ad companies, unfortunately, will knuckle under. They're just like in other areas of communication and media, there's a disproportionate representation of a certain ethnic group in the ad companies, and they back down, and it's happening all over the country. We're going to have guests next Tuesday about one of these other billboards that was put up for the USS Liberty and its veterans, and it doesn't even say anything other than that Israel attacked the USS Liberty, which is an historical fact. And the billboard company got just attacked and said, oh, it's anti-Semitic to talk about that. And no, it isn't. Israel did attack the USS Liberty. They killed a bunch of American military people, wounded a bunch more. The ship had to ultimately be scrapped. That's an historical fact. And Israel doesn't like historical facts being, shown to the public at large, who are picking up a huge cost of propping up Israel financially. And so they come on out there saying, well, anybody talking about the USS Liberty, you're just doing it because you hate the Jewish people. No, we're trying to get some overdue historical recognition for what those U.S. sailors went through on that ship.
Yes. And what I'd like to know is, first, what's wrong with being anti-Semitic anyway? And aren't they even not Semitics?
That's a subject of much debate. First of all, Semites also include Arabs. We know that the Ashkenazi Jews, who are the majority that came down to Israel from Europe and Russia, are actually descendants of Central Asian Khazars who converted. Now, we need to be very careful how the definition of anti-Semitism has changed, because originally it was supposed to mean somebody who hated Semites just for being Semites. But the issue isn't these people's ethnicity. It's not their religion. It is the behavior of their government. And Israel's government deflects criticism by constantly saying, oh, you're just being an anti-Semite, Holocaust, Hitler, Nazis, Jewish hatred. But that's like trying to defend the crimes of the Nazis by screaming, you just hate the German people. And by taking it into that other context, you realize how incredibly silly and absurd this is, but Israel keeps getting away with this because the establishment media goes right on along and saying, oh, yes, criticism of Israel's government, that's definitely Jew hate. And unfortunately, they're actually getting laws passed in this country saying that you cannot criticize the actions of the government of Israel because it's anti-Semitic. But, the reason we have a First Amendment is to allow unfettered criticism of government, any government, without fear of retribution.
Right. Thank you, Mike.
All right, thank you. And we're going to switch over here to Bob in Indiana. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Oh, Mike, I have a couple things here. Number one, don't you think that we should start hoarding and hiding under our mattress $100 bills?
Well, I think you should be hoarding and hiding silver and gold, because at some point those $100 bills are going to be worth about as much as that Hillary Clinton toilet paper I have in the back of my set here.
I think so, too. I just wonder when it's going to happen.
Well, they're just talking about it now, but we're also hearing coming out of Europe that they're talking about helicopter money onto the general population to try and stop the collapse of this Ponzi scheme, and they're going to need those bills. Ultimately, we've got two competing agendas here, and one agenda is the bankers want to find some way to outlaw cash or any portable store of wealth so that all the wealth of planet Earth is inside their bank's computers to play with, and you will have to go crawling on your knees and begging them to be allowed to eat, to pay your rent, and so forth and so on. It's a return to feudalism.
Right. Okay, number two, I was wondering about your theme song and who the drummer is.
The opening theme song was composed by my wife, and the others are from various other artists. Are you talking bump music or the opening theme?
Okay, thanks, Mike.
All right, and we're going to let you go. Thank you very much for the phone call. By the way, if you go to WRHradio.com, that's the website for the radio show, and down in the middle of it, there's a link where you can go listen to all the bump music and all the themes in their entirety and find out who the original artists were. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. We got a bunch of calls here, and we are going to switch over to Barbara in Tennessee. Aloha, Barbara. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Michael. I read several days ago the account of the North American Law Center throwing out the gauntlet to Cruz that they were going to take him down in 2 weeks. And questions. I wondered if you can help me narrow down a deadline for their threat.
They simply said 2 weeks, and we're halfway through to that.
Oh, okay. Why? And my second question is, why would they threaten instead of just exposing him?
I don't know. Maybe they're waiting. Maybe they're hoping that Ted Cruz will call up and offer a huge amount of money for their information. The issue is that much of the documentation regarding Ted Cruz's birth, naturalization, and the marriage of his parents is currently under seal. It's being denied when people are filing Freedom of Information Act requests for it. And that alone is raising some questions about what's really going on. And I agree that rather than simply issue a warning that we're going to release the incriminating information in 2 weeks, they should have just dumped it. Because coming on out and saying, I'm going to release this in 2 weeks is like painting a target on your backside.
Right. Well, thank you very much.
All right, thank you. We're going to switch over here to Brian in Pennsylvania. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, I want to talk about two things. I want to talk about what happened in Colorado, but first I want to make just a statement that I thought was real funny. I was watching The Simpsons last night, and it was an episode where I guess the little boy was elected to be a candidate for president, and Lisa was talking about the rights and how the Constitution said you had to be 35 to run for president, and then Bart came in with, I think they passed the Patriot Act to kill the Constitution to save our freedoms.
It does seem to get that bizarre here, and the way that, the things are going on here. We're taking away the Bill of Rights to preserve your freedoms and liberties, and of course that big whopper Bush was always using, these other countries only hate us for our freedoms. No, those other countries hate us because we were bombing the heck out of them.
Yeah, but the main reason why I called was I want to talk about what happened in Colorado, how last August they voted for themselves to get rid of the primaries, and that way they could do whatever they wanted. And I got into an argument with one of my friends over this because he's an idiot and he's still hanging to the belief that I guess the system isn't rigged. And I tried to point it out that it's like you can blatantly see that it is rigged. They changed the rules because that's what was it he said? He said he's like, Trump just didn't play the game right. It's like he should have known the rules ahead of time. It's like,
that's a talking point. That right there tells us your friend is not an idiot. He's part of the system, because that's the big talking point that went out of the GOP leadership just today. It was even on the news. That's their new talking point. Trump knew the rules and he just didn't play the game. It's all his fault. That's what they're all saying, and your friend appears to be one of these people who are part of that system.
Yeah, but how can you play by the rules when you could arbitrarily change the rules whenever you feel like it? It's like the system. It's like if I want to play by the rules, you can't change the rules at the last second. Now technically, the GOP did not change the rules at the last second. They did vote through this change of simply canceling the primary last August. What happened is Cruz's people showed up at the GOP state convention in Colorado. And basically got there first. They got there early, and then they basically just blocked any of Trump's people from getting in there in significant numbers, so they were able to vote the delegates all for Ted Cruz. And it wasn't a rule change. It's underhanded. It's clearly fraudulent. But at this point, I think we would all be hard-pressed to point to any part of our current election system as being fair and above board. It just isn't there. The whole system is designed to be rigged and distorted and hijacked to keep the current power elite in their very comfortable positions on top of us. But it's not democracy. That's one of the things I made a point to him was, how can you say that this is okay and that Trump knew everything? How could you be okay with them taking away the people's right to vote for who they want? That's what I don't get. Everybody's okay with it. Nobody cares that they took away Colorado's right to pick who they wanted. Well,
you've got the GOP leadership flat out saying that we should just get rid of primaries and caucuses. It's up to the party leadership to choose the candidates. And, of course, the party leadership are choosing the candidates that are liked by Israel and Wall Street and the military-industrial complex and the pharmaceutical-industrial complex and the security-industrial complex. And the ordinary working-class people, we're just completely cut out of the process right now. And that's why we're not a democracy anymore. We're not even a republic. We have slipped into full-bore fascist economic dictatorship.
Yeah, it just drives me nuts. I personally hate politics. I really do. But this is just going past my limit of how much I can take.
Boy, I'm hearing that from so many people. We're basically looking at the straw that may break this camel's back. Okay?
All right, thanks, Mike. Keep up the good work.
All right, we're going to switch over to Scott in Wisconsin. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, aloha, Mikey. I'm called to bother you. Mikey, I'm a sad American right now.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sad because I want to ask all these people across America, and I'm going to let it fly right now. When did this country lose its integrity? Reaching out, checking on your neighbor, and I'm blessed to have neighbors around me where we check on each other and take care of each other when we need. Michael, I am so thankful to hear you preach the truth on this corruption, that everywhere we look and everywhere we deal with, it seems like there's corruption all over this country and the world. And I would like to have a peaceful resolution like you, brother, go across this. But when I go out and talk to some of my buddies, and I don't have too many because I like the truth too, Mike, they are starting to get the fuel oil burning inside.
Okay, well,
And
I need to cut you off because we're almost at a commercial break here, and I'd like to tamp down the fuel oil thing. I think what is starting to happen here is exactly what happened in the Soviet Union, where the people just finally reached the point of saying the government is full of it, and we're just not going to listen anymore. Because we have this situation of the Panama Papers, which is exposing the fact that the rich aren't paying any taxes, while we're being told we have to pay more taxes. We know the elections are completely fraudulent. The government has delegitimized itself by walking away from the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. And I think the reaction that I think is a healthy one is for the American people to say, yeah, you're full of it, and we're not going to listen anymore. We're not going to fill out the paperwork. We're not going to pay your bills. And, you cannot have our children for your wars of conquest. Go away. You're fired. And the reality is that the United States government does not have enough military to confront and control 300 million angry Americans. They rule you through lies, fraud, and deception because that is all they've got. And that's why ultimately they're weak, and that's why they're afraid. They're trying to come up with yet another hoax, another fraud to control you. I have reached the conclusion that this whole NSA, we're spying on everybody, is as false as when the Gestapo played the same dirty trick on the German people. I have no doubt certain select individuals are being monitored, but they can't watch all 300 million Americans. It is computationally and logistically impossible. And certainly the fact that they never find any of these cyber criminals undermines this idea that they're watching everything. It's a bluff to keep you scared, to keep you silent. And if you let yourself be afraid, the bad guys win. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. Now, as you know, late yesterday over in New Jersey, Judge Jeff Mason ruled that Ted Cruz qualifies as a natural-born citizen and is eligible to be president. And I have received a flood of email from Cruz's supporters that settles the matter and we should just drop it. Fat chance. Now, I did a little web search about judicial error, mistake. And the first thing that's very obvious, when you look at how many appeals and reversals there are, judges do make mistakes all the time. Now, in his decision, Judge Mason claims that he's not really sure what natural born is supposed to mean. Well, the framers of the Constitution were relying on the prevailing laws of the day, in particular the laws of nations by Vattel, as to what natural born means. And Chief Justice John Jay explained why he put that as a requirement for the president. It's not there for the senators and representatives. And where Judge Mason has erred is in not explaining what he thinks natural born means. His entire justification for going along with it is that, well, nobody's really sure who wasn't there, but John Jay was there. Now, first off, I do not cede my right to think for myself to anyone in a funny-looking robe. Second, and this is important to remember, the Constitution does not, in fact, reserve interpretation of the Constitution exclusively to the courts. The Supreme Court has arrogated that to themselves. They claim they're the supreme authority to interpret the Constitution. It's not actually in the Constitution. That Constitution belongs to we the people. And we are free to make our own choices what natural born means. And again, the fact that a judge says something doesn't mean it's right or true. I mean, after all, judges sentenced all those people to hang in Salem, Massachusetts for the crime of witchcraft. And the verdicts were sound in logic and law, and they were still boneheaded and wrong. Judges are throwing people in prison for pointing out the factual discrepancies in the official history of World War II, and now we're hearing that the justice system is going on the warpath against anybody who questions the dogma of human-caused global warming. A judge convicted and sentenced Bruno Richard Hauptmann to death. That's now recognized to have been a serious miscarriage of justice. He was wrongfully executed for a crime he did not commit. Now, as for Judge Jeff Mason, it's clear he failed to exercise due diligence. He didn't go back and look at the writings of the people who wrote the Constitution, in particular Chief Justice John Jay, and the numerous references to Vattel's The Law of Nations. John Jay set it forth and said the natural-born requirement for the presidency is to prevent the military might of the United States from ever being under the command of a person born and raised in a foreign country. There's a reason it's there for the presidency. It's not a requirement to be a senator or a representative, only for the presidency. And the fallacy of Judge Mason's thinking is exposed with a simple thought experiment. I mentioned it yesterday. I'm going to repeat it again today. Let's say that back in the 1950s, an American woman moved to the Soviet Union. She got married and produced a child who lives and is indoctrinated in the Soviet Union during his youth. Then the mother returns to the United States, bringing her child, who thinks and feels like a Soviet citizen, back to the United States. Now, under Judge Jeff Mason's thinking, that child is supposedly eligible to be president of the United States, the mortal enemy of the child's homeland. Does that make any sense at all? So, anyway, we're going to go ahead and grab ourselves a phone call from Steve in Massachusetts. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. I wouldn't be surprised if this judge had good intentions at first and later he was just told to back off. You never know.
Somebody may have called up and said, hey, if Ted Cruz becomes president, you're first on the list for a Supreme Court appointment. Yeah, it could be absolutely that blatantly, or maybe the judge's name is on the D.C. Madams lists or something.
I mean, you see so much corruption now. You can't take anything off the books now. Anything could happen. You know, everyone's paid off, and we've seen it time and time again. What I initially called for was this guy called a couple of days ago. He said he watched 60 Minutes, and he said they were talking about how Saudi Arabia was taking the blame for the 9/11 attacks.
Yes.
And the first thing that came to my mind was this starting to signify that the petrodollar is coming to an end, and they're starting to throw Saudi Arabia under the bus.
Well, Saudi Arabia has a huge amount of oil, and Saudi Arabia has been making friends with China and Russia. And so, yeah, I mean, this plan to conquer all of the oil-rich nations and shackle them to the dollar, it's an all-or-nothing deal. And that's why I knew right from the start, all the way back when Wesley Clark blew the whistle on this plan, that somewhere down the road, the U.S. government would betray Saudi Arabia and bring down their government and put in a puppet ruler. And it's an absolute epic betrayal. But again, look for what should be there and isn't. And what isn't in this story of Saudi Arabia being the author of 9/11 is a motive for them to do that. They've made a huge amount of money off the petrodollar deal, and they've invested much of that money back here in the United States of America. They're not going to do anything that's going to allow the U.S. government to simply seize all of that money. We're talking billions and billions and billions of dollars. And second, if Saudi Arabia, for some reason, wanted to hurt the United States, all they have to do is ask for their money back. And it would be perfectly legal and moral for them to do that. And the devastation to our economy would make 9/11 itself look like a speed bump. They don't need to crash airplanes into buildings.
No, absolutely. And the timing seems a little suspect, too. I mean, right at a time where I'm hearing a lot of experts saying that this is possibly the year where everything comes crashing down, all of a sudden they're having these reports come out that Saudi Arabia is possibly involved with...
Well, this could be coming from Israel, because everybody's looking at all the evidence that Israel had partnered with U.S. intelligence agencies to bring about 9/11, and they're very, very worried because Israel still wants the U.S. taxpayers to go on sending them all kinds of money, and if the American taxpayer says, hey, wait a minute, Israel helped our government perpetrate this war-starting fraud on us, why are we still giving them money? And there's a lot of different disparate agendas, and a lot of them are starting to hit the panic button. And that makes their actions more reckless, and that is actually a good thing because their mistakes are more obvious, and people are catching that now.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It seems like everything's under the microscope now, and everything they do.
And it should be. It should be. Every American citizen ought to have a big Sherlock Holmes magnifying glass, and they ought to be watching everything the government is doing, and never trust anything coming from the government simply because it is the government. And it is the curse of political power. It attracts the very sort of people who should never be allowed to have it. And that's why we have to keep them on a leash. That was the reason for the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. To tell that government, these are the things you're not allowed to do. And unfortunately, our present government is doing most of them.
And that's why when everything's said and done, we have to make sure everything's done right when everything comes crashing down. And we got to make sure this is our time.
Absolutely, absolutely. We're already drawing up a blueprint for the new America. A lot of it is based on the original Constitution and the Bill of Rights. And one absolute carved-in stone requirement, no more private central banks. Okay?
Absolutely. Okay, well, thank you, Michael.
All right, thank you. We're going to switch over to Dennis in Florida. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. It's really good to talk to you. Listen, I want to shed some light on this thing in Jersey. This judge made a ruling. He basically passed a hot potato. And he used clearly legal wording. He used the word may in his decision. He never used the word shall or will be. That leaves it entirely open and returns the power to Secretary of State Guadagno initially. Ultimately, It may go to the Supreme Court. But here's where Donald Trump is very smart in his infinite wisdom, so to speak. He has Governor Christie's protection of Secretary of State Guadagno, and she's under his political umbrella. Now we know why Trump enlisted Christie.
Okay, we got to let you go. We got to take a break for our top of the hour news and commercials, and I'll have more about this Ted Cruz situation when we return. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 2. Now, we're talking about Ted Cruz and this constant back and forth over whether he's a natural-born U.S. citizen or not. Now, Ted Cruz's supporters are out there saying, well, he was a U.S. citizen by birth. Well, there's a problem with that because Ted Cruz was born in Canada, and under Canadian law, you cannot be a dual citizen. Ted's birth certificate is a Canadian birth certificate. Ted Cruz became a naturalized U.S. citizen. That paperwork is in the public record. Now, if he was automatically a U.S. citizen at birth, he wouldn't have to go through the naturalization process. Now, there's another issue because, as I mentioned before, much of Ted Cruz's documentation about his early life is being withheld from the public. And that right there is a good reason to have a question mark here. And apparently, Canadian authorities are unable to actually say when Ted Cruz's parents were actually married. Because both of Ted Cruz's parents were in the middle of divorces from their prior spouses. And if they got married before the divorces were final, they could be charged with bigamy. And so there's a real possibility Ted Cruz was born out of wedlock. And here's where it gets interesting, because under Section 309C of the Immigration Naturalization Act, a person born to a woman out of wedlock is not granted citizenship in the United States by birth. So you can see how confusing this is getting. Another one of Ted Cruz's deceptions, and there do seem to be so many of them. That one where his mother was a computer programmer, but she never learned to type because she didn't want to type for some executive somewhere. And anybody who actually has worked with computers knows that typing is kind of necessary to do that. Now, here's an interesting story, and this comes out of the Marshall Report, and it's a rather amazing situation. Ted Cruz has been representing that his father, Rafael Cruz, was a pro-Batista Cuban exile, was opposed to Fidel Castro, and that's why he had to flee Cuba and come to the United States. But it looks like there's a little bit more to the story, because this author, David Zephyr, has found a connection between Rafael Cruz and the Central Intelligence Agency, and it is backed up by a very famous photograph of Lee Harvey Oswald in New Orleans handing out pro-Castro leaflets. Remember the Fair Play for Cuba Committee, Guy Bannister and all of that? And in the photo standing near Lee Harvey Oswald, also handing out pro-Castro leaflets, is Rafael Cruz. So, anyway, now then. The Missouri Secretary of State finally, after all this time, has officially called the state for Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton. And Donald Trump has won the state's 12 at-large delegates. Took a very, very long time for that to be going. All right, let's go ahead and grab a phone call from Pete in Florida. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. I called a couple days ago. Thanks again for taking my call. I'm wondering what people really think anti-Semitism means. Does it mean we have the cooties or something? I mean,
well, you know, like I said, originally an anti-Semite was somebody who hated somebody because they were Semites, like hating Mexicans just because they're Mexicans or hating blacks just because they're blacks. And yes, that's racist and it's wrong. But Israel has hijacked the term to basically say that anybody who criticizes the government of Israel is only doing so because they hate the Jewish people. And as I pointed out in the context with Adolf Hitler, that's nonsense. You know, we're not talking about their ethnicity or their religion. It is their behavior that is deserving of criticism, and simply saying, oh, you're just criticizing us only because you hate the Jewish people. It's nonsense, but they've succeeded in getting away with it. These days, it's changing even more. An anti-Semite is somebody that Israel hates. But, you know, the good news is they've used that so many times, it's lost its shock effect. They burned it out. 10, 20 years ago, if somebody said you're an anti-Semite, oh, no, I'm not. Absolutely. I'll do anything to prove I'm not an anti-Semite. Here, take my money. I'll support. These days, you know, Israel says, oh, you're an anti-Semite. Okay. I don't think I am, but big deal. Feel free to think what you want. I don't care anymore. It's burned out.
Well, Israelis themselves are the biggest anti-Semites going after the Palestinians the way they have for the last 60 years.
Or even other sects of Jews. I mean, my first wife was Ashkenazi, and they were some of the most racist people I've ever met, including toward other types of Jews. I mean, and it's a double standard. I mean, and that's typical of what we see coming out of there. They want to practice racism and apartheid and discrimination against Palestinians and Arabs, but they don't want any discrimination against them. They scream bloody murder. They're trying to shut down the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement. But back in the 1930s, Judea declared a global boycott against Germany, trying to shut them down after they got rid of their private central bank. And so the attitude is it's always okay when we do it, but you can't do it back. In fact, I think it was Ariel Sharon who came out with this statement saying that Israel has the right to judge any other nation on earth, but no nation on earth has a right to judge Israel. That's their attitude.
Because they are their deity's chosen people. Come on, Mike, these are the biggest narcissists on the planet. And it's a cultural situation. It's built into their religion. And they grow up believing this stuff. And it's a very attractive idea that we're God's chosen. Nobody wants to quit believing in that because then they have to start behaving in a little more civilized fashion. One last thing, my friend.
Yes.
The blueprint for the new America should also include a couple points about judicial precedent. It's out of there. There's no such thing as judicial precedent because the judges in this country were never given the authority to interpret the law. In fact, the only authority they have is to uphold the law. And the same thing goes with, the contempt of court. Give me a break, you know. If I piss off a mailman, does that mean he can hold me in contempt of the post office? I mean, give me a break.
Well, you know, there have been court decisions that say that a contempt of court charge is voided if the court is, in fact, acting in a contemptible fashion. And you're absolutely right. The Constitution does not allow the courts to interpret the Constitution. Go ahead and read Article 3 all you want. The courts are basically charged with enforcing the Constitution and the letter of the law. Nowhere in there does it say the courts have a right to alter or reinterpret the Constitution on the fly. The Supreme Court grabbed that for itself, and everybody went along because it allowed them to rig the system a little bit more.
Well, absolutely. It sets a precedent, pardon my French, that they can interpret and come up with an exception to the rule. And the whole point is you throw it against the Constitution. Either it's legal or it's not, period.
Well, an earlier Supreme Court ruled in Marbury versus Madison, laws repugnant to the Constitution are automatically null and void. And they don't need any kind of a decision on it. They're basically saying if it doesn't meet with the Constitution, it's already invalid, and anybody trying to enforce that law is actually acting in a criminal manner.
When they came out with that decision, they basically restated something that's already in the Constitution.
That's exactly what they were doing. They were reaffirming a principle that the Constitution is the supreme law of the land, and the issue was whether somebody had passed a law and charged somebody else under that law, and the person who was being charged says it's against the Constitution, and the Supreme Court agreed with him. Any laws that are repugnant to the Constitution are automatically null and void. We don't need to wait for any other further decisions. That's where it is.
But by the same token, reasonable suspicion is not in the Constitution, i.e., therefore it should be null and void?
Well, no. I mean, the Bill of Rights guards us against unreasonable search and seizure, which is another one that's currently under attack with that ridiculous Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals decision. Pete, got to let you go. Got to take a break for commercials, sell some products, make some money. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. We're going to go right back to the phones and clear up the calls so we can get back to the news here. Fred in Utah, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Mike. I don't have television, and we are both seniors. So we listen on the radio usually. But all the time I hear Hillary Clinton bragging about her work experience here or there, foreign policy, all kind of work experience. So I wanted to say that one of her work experience, which in my opinion is very shameful, because her husband and Hillary Clinton, they were both we had like two presidents. Everybody knows that.
Yes.
So at any rate, I remember like about 3 months before, election, so I almost have to have 7.5 years. If you remember Mr. Glickman, who was a Jewish guy, and I was hoping that he would really care about health and environment, he was interviewed on PBS with Jim Lehrer on the evening news. And then Jim Lehrer asked him that this genetically engineered food that they don't use pesticides, can we consider them organic or not? And his answer was that we are discussing the subject with the agro-business industry.
Yes.
And we are hoping, and I just said suddenly, wow, after 7.5 years we are still negotiating whether a genetic engineer can be considered, what's that called? Organic. And then another thing Jim Lehrer didn't have a follow-up question was, how about the water? For example, in San Diego, NBC had a report that the contamination that is Colorado River is called perchlorate.
Perchlorates.
It affects thyroid. My two of his stepdaughters, one of them died at the age of 50, and she had severe thyroid problem.
Yes.
And the other one was younger. She had thyroid problem. My wife also is below the normal. And then Chief Justice of Supreme Court, if you recall, he died of thyroid cancer. Now I heard on the news that in North Carolina they have perchlorate in their water. Now, another thing I want to say also that San Diego Union, in the conservative, so-called conservative Republican, front page of San Diego Union had in 1991 saying that we have radioactive material in our water in Colorado River.
Yes.
Since I've been living in San Diego for 17 years, then I know that there's a place called El Centro. A lot of vegetables to our state of Utah even comes from that area. And so we have perchlorate in Colorado River, and then we have also nuclear waste that is come from Henderson, I believe.
And we have lead contamination in the tap water.
Yeah.
We have the problem with, we're one of the most drugged nations on earth with prescription legal medications, which get flushed into the toilet. They're not processed out by the water processing plants. And so people who do not need those medications and can be harmed by them are being exposed to them. Yeah. It's just an incredibly reckless way of running a society.
The reason I told you that she brags about that, and Jim Lehrer did not question. I don't know. I haven't seen or heard him. Mr. Glickman, maybe he has got himself a cancer or something. I hope he's healthy. But I'm just saying that she brags all the time that her work experience. How about you appointed the Secretary of Agriculture, and because you're Jewish, I've been around Jewish people a lot. I've worked for them, and they are very health-oriented, or kosher food and this and that. Mm-hmm. And then why, after 7.5 years, you have not even decided what is, and also part of the organic is the water. Nobody talks. I asked many.
Well, technically, no. The water is handled separately. Organic refers to a class of chemicals.
Well, I understand that, but I mean, just we have to know. When I buy, for example, what's that called, lettuce, I pay attention what region it's coming from.
That's a very smart thing to do.
Yeah, I mean, because...
But you know what's going to happen? They just recently passed a law to make it illegal to identify where meat is coming from. And they'll just do the same thing to the fruits and vegetables, saying you don't need to know where this is coming from. And yet there are clearly areas where fields are being irrigated with contaminated water. Out in California, dealing with their drought, they're actually starting to use fracking wastewater to irrigate crops. I mean, it's...
Right. I just want to say that this is one of her work experience, that after 7.5 years, imagine if you go private company, say after 7.5 years, I have not been able to achieve the job that you told me to finish the job.
Well, again, the food industry, the GMO companies, they want the government to lie and say that their creations are natural and organic. They absolutely are not. The argument they're using is that their creations are no different from farmers who create hybrids through interbreeding. But yes, it is very different because they're going on in there and directly tinkering with the code of life. There's a lot of reasons why we should be looking at Hillary's job experience, the cattle futures trades, the travel office firings. Hillary Care was an absolute disaster. And her tenure as Secretary of State was one foreign policy disaster after the other. And then for her to come on out and say we didn't lose anybody in Libya after the ambassador gets killed, I'm beginning to think that rumored blood clot in her brain is starting to shift around. Anyway, listen, Fred, I got to let you go.
Let me say one quick more thing.
One quick.
Was a Jewish guy, and he said, I read in the paper they say we need an experienced, service technician. I was a service technician. He said, that's very silly. I said, why? He said, we can have a good experience as a service technician or false or bad experience. It's better to write, I need a skilled service technician. So we need a skilled person in every field.
I like that. I like that. That's very good. It's a very good distinction here. Thank you for the call. We're going to switch over to Frank in London. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. I just want to address the idiocy of political correctness. Well, it's not idiocy for some, according to what the agenda is. But I had to attend a meeting with my local councillor, which is a Labour politician that represents the area I live in Camden, and with regards to our national housing situation, social housing situation in London, where more and more people can't afford to buy private housing, they selling off public property, which is social housing, and selling it to private developers, and they say they can't because they're not getting any money from the government. They have to do it. They have to sell it. But although I haven't seen any more social housing being built. Anyway, you had people there you had white people there. I myself are of Afro-Caribbean background. I'm black, but you had white people there. And they were literally afraid. They were struggling for a term because what they wanted to say was there are no social housing for indigenous people who are working and they can't afford to pay their rent. Yes, social housing is for everyone, but what they were trying to say, you got loads of people, and I can see for myself, are living now on my block. They can't speak a word of English. It's not their fault.
Frank, I'm going to have to ask you to wait for 4 minutes. We got to take a break for commercials. Sure. I'm going to come back to you after the commercial break. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're talking with Frank in London, and you're talking about a phenomenon we're seeing all over the world, here in the United States of America. Home ownership is vanishing. People are being forced into a rental-only economy. Like I said, it's the resurgence of serfdom and feudalism, where the banks want to own absolutely everything, and you will spend your life working as hard as you can to make them richer in exchange for permission to exist. And, we had the IMF is now out there saying that, IMF or the World Bank, I think it's the World Bank, is now out there saying that governments that are too deeply in debt ought to just confiscate the wealth of the people and turn it over to the banks, and even that will not pay off the debt. They'll just be allowed to sustain. It's enslavement. Yeah. It's enslavement.
It is. And I think what they're really saying in a roundabout way is to seize the country's assets. So they own the country. And this political correctness thing, I can see the frustration in the people there. It was predominantly white people that attended. I mean, I'm not going to speak for everyone and say, well, I know everybody and they're not racist, but whether they were or not, it was the whole stupidity is the question they asked the counselor, or the politician rather, is that how is it that we are born and grow in this area, our children cannot get housing here? We've worked, we've paid our taxes, and, the indigenous people, we can't get housing. And we live in, and I can speak on first-hand experience, that people, even on my block, can't speak a word of English. I have to force people in the morning to say good morning because I look at them in their face and say good morning. Now, I'm not against that. But what I'm trying to say is the government, with all this political correctness, is causing social resentment where people are looking at each other and pointing the finger at each other, and we losing who the enemy are. And this Labour Party representative, I mean, she was saying, oh, well, we all live in a diverse community.
And the longer we live here, diverse it gets. Listen, all right, now, Frank, first of all, the political correctness aspect of it is a cover. The real agenda is trying to blur all the populations of the world together into one formless mass with no clear idea of who they are as a culture or a society or a region in order to make it easier to eventually drop the borders for this single global government, single global workforce living permanently in slavery to a single global central bank. That's the real agenda here. And they're trying to use political correctness as a tool to shut people up on this ridiculous theory that you shouldn't say anything because somebody somewhere on the planet may be offended by it. But you cannot have freedom of speech without offending somebody, because there's always going to be somebody who is going to not like what you're saying. That's just a reality of free speech. And again, offended is a subjective thing. What offends you may not offend me. I'm offended by people whose only sense of self-valuation is always finding things to be offended about.
That's right. Unfortunately, that same I went through all the process of all the because I work for the council of all this social political correctness, and you did have people who their main purpose was going around listening to people to pick on them because they may have said something offensive. That was their job. It was just idiotic. People were getting paid for that craziness. But I understand the agenda. It's a very insidious agenda behind it, because when you haven't got an identity of, you have nothing to fight for.
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. If they destroy your sense of historical original identity, you're not motivated to stand up to the tyrants. And that's exactly what's going on. We're seeing it here in the U.S. They're trying to outlaw the Confederate flag now. The apparently Common Core agenda in our public schools is trying to smear and denigrate the Founding Fathers. so that they can sell the idea that really the Constitution, we should just throw it away anyway because it's the product of all these treasonous, traitorous people, and look at all the terrible things they did back there in the 1700s. And it is an attack on our culture and our identity. Frank, I need to let you go.
Okay, Mike, by the way, just before I leave, just to let you know that Ratchenrook is running away from the Ukraine, and he'll be running for the American presidency sometime soon.
Okay. All right. Thanks an awful lot. We're going to switch over to Mo in Florida. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Oh, thanks for taking my call, Michael. You're your voice of reason in the wilderness. You know, I think that the bottom line here is, and I know what you're doing. I'm a nonviolent person too. You know, I am a registered gun owner, but you know, I don't want to start anything. But I think, you know, if you look back to the American Revolution, there was a lot of, you know, I mean, George Washington fought, you know, but, you know, Jefferson, a lot of them were all for the revolution, but nobody really wanted a bloody conflict. But when these psychopaths get in charge, and they always rise to the top, these are the people that want to control everybody. And as you have stated very eloquently, that, you know, we get to a point where, you know, if they relinquish power, I mean, there is no way for this thing to stop, I don't think, at this point. I hope you're right, and I want nonviolent, like the Russian deal. Mm-hmm. But these people that we are talking about, they are the ones that set up Russia, you know, and this whole thing, these world bankers. They are the top, you know, the octopus, the Goldman Sachs, you know, I mean, obviously the banks.
Yeah, the private central bankers. And the thing is, it's all a fraud. It's all a gigantic hoax. And it's only going to work as long as you allow yourself to be brainwashed into thinking this is the way the world is supposed to be, with debt-based monetary systems and permanent debt servitude to the bankers. And as soon as you stop believing that this is the way the world is supposed to be, it starts to fall apart. Because there have been previous systems of enslavement, ruled by divine right, ruled by slavery, and when the human civilization evolved to the point of saying, hey, there's no such thing as divine right, and slavery is wrong, and now we're on the doorstep of saying, you know, debt-based currencies and permanent debt servitude is wrong. And that system will come crashing down. I agree with you. A bloody revolution in this country may be unavoidable. I'm hearing way too many people talk about it. I still think it's a bad idea. I think we need to go with the Gandhi approach. I think we need to basically try and shepherd the nation along the same path that led to the collapse of the Soviet Union. And I feel like we're actually getting close on that.
Well, start being. I hope you're right, but you know, I don't want to. You know, I think that these psychopaths are the worst. The neocon Zionist, you know, cabal, whatever you want to call them, the ones that are running the banksters, the Rothschilds, whatever you want to call them, the top people that run the banks, like you said, all wars are bankers' wars. That is exactly right. They are not going to relinquish power, because if they do, they know they're in big trouble. It's not going to be just go home to your farm. You know, there's going to be there's going to be retribution, and I think they're playing this game as far as they can. And they're going to try to inflate the currency, of course. That's the easy way out. Once that... Well,
okay, I need to cut you off because we're coming on a commercial break here. Okay, the private central bankers of the world are afraid because the people of planet Earth are onto their little game, and that's why they're trying to rush forward with this New World Order thing, to basically create a global dictatorship so that we are unable to stand up and say we refuse to go along with this fraud anymore. That's why they're trying to ban cash so that all of our wealth is in their computers, because then they get to write the rules of the monetary system from now on without any regard to the people. Look at how the American voter is being dismissed by the political party leadership. We're on the path to that global dictatorship, and we need to see that it somehow stumbles and falls in such a way that the people of planet Earth realize what's going on, and they're going to stand up and say, okay, this has gone as far as we're going to let it go. It's time to bring it to an end. And again, all we have to do is stop listening, stop complying, stop filling out the paperwork, stop paying their bills. We just quit supporting them, and that will bring it down. We got to take a break for commercials. Thank you very much for the phone call, Mo. Back with another phone call after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're going to grab one more phone call and then get back to some serious news here. JD in Texas, aloha. What's on your mind?
Hey, it's JB, aloha from Texas. First off, I want to say, if we had a free market society, your show should be on like one of the cable stations. I'm always having a great time. I've been a fan of yours for about 6 or 8 months. I love your discipline, and I love Claire being on Fridays.
Mm-hmm. I certainly wouldn't object if some network or cable company wanted to.
Oh, it's awesome.
Actually, I want Rush Limbaugh's job. I want that golden microphone.
I'm constantly laughing at you. You're so funny and so Claire. I love hearing Claire laugh in the background. I love hearing Janet talk about pulling her guns out. I listened to that like 3 times last night. Whenever Janet said I freaked out, my mom was scared to use them. I know she shouldn't say that, but anyway, I have 3 comments. You can comment on any 3 of them. But I'm a huge fan, Mike. You're doing a great job.
Thank you.
I'm a ex-school teacher, coach. I majored in political science, but I got a DWI about 2011, so I'm an aspiring comedian.
Okay.
But anyway, here's my 3 comments. I saw last night, it was great with Donald and his family, but I didn't know Ivanka was converted to Judaism. That's one. You could comment on that. Or I want to talk about how do you think Donald should bring up the Social Security, how Bill and HW basically stole all the money. Or also I saw on CNN today where Jane Sanders basically chimed in about how unfair it is with the system, the primaries and the caucuses.
Yes.
So either 3 of those comments, I would love to hear your comment about it.
Well, as far as who converts to what religion or not, that's kind of irrelevant. My feeling is that good people are going to do good things and bad people are going to do bad things, and both will often cite religion as their excuse and justification. As far as the Social Security issue, again, I don't agree with Donald Trump on everything that he says, and based on what he has said, I think too much of his worldview is still dominated by what he sees on corporate TV networks and newspapers. I'd like to know that he's becoming aware of the situation. But that may have to wait until he gets into the White House. I mean, if you go back and you look at history, presidents very often don't find what's going on in their country for real until they take office. That certainly happened in Greece after Papandreou stepped down and his replacement got into the office and finally got to see the books and saw how bad things really were. Or Harry Truman, who was threatened with arrest about asking what was going on out there in New Mexico, and then on his first day in office as the president, they finally got around to telling him about the atomic bomb. So there's a lot of hidden material that Trump probably has not been shared with and won't find out until the transition period. But in some ways, he strikes me as politically naive as Jimmy Carter was going on into the office, which worked out. Jimmy Carter turned out to be one of our best presidents, yeah.
That's the first president I remember, but, I mean, I'm not a big, huge fan, but, the reason I found you is because somehow found Alex Jones. He claims that, that Donald's a super cell and he knows everything, which I wish that was true, but, I mean, if he knows everything, he should know about, if he's been paying attention, he should know that, the Social Security president, he actually has gone on record saying that is despicable that people say that we should, just start privatizing the retirement funds. Because that would be a nightmare, I think.
Oh, anytime anything gets privatized, it's always worse for the people. Privatization is designed to take what is a public utility or a public service and turn it into a for-profit situation. That's what happened with the creation of the Federal Reserve.
How can we ever tax the Federal Reserve? Is that a legitimate complaint I could bring up? If we asked our government to tax the Federal Reserve, could that be a legitimate, argument? I mean, because you said that yesterday, and I was like, yeah, I would like to sit there and demand tax the Federal Reserve. Well, I mean, my family, is getting taxed. I mean, like my parents, my stepdad he's an administrator of a jail, and my mom's a school teacher, and they had to pay tons of taxes. So I get really offended when they're having to
what we're finding out here, and the Panama Papers only reinforced it. The rich don't pay taxes. Corporations don't pay taxes. The Federal Reserve doesn't pay taxes. All these media outlets don't pay taxes. These tax loopholes have been set up so that only ordinary working people bear the financial burden. And it is a stunning hypocrisy, and a lot of people are very, very angry about it. And a lot of people are saying that this is ridiculous for corporations and people who are worth millions, if not billions of dollars are basically skating free and taxes on ordinary people keep going up and up. Here in the United States of America, we're now spending more on taxes than we do on our housing, food, and clothing put together. Government is the most expensive thing you're ever going to be forced to buy. Are you getting value for that money? And the answer is a big fat no, you are not.
Okay, one more question. What's your favorite memory from Lost?
My favorite memory from Lost? Oh, I haven't thought about that in a long time. You know, I don't have one that comes to mind at the moment. I have a lot of positive memories and also a lot of...
For me, the first episode was awesome.
Well, I wasn't with the show on the first season. I didn't join the show until season number 2.
Well, Mike, I love you. I'm going to start calling in more often. And I actually emailed you one time about Obama on Facebook saying, hey, if you want to know the truth about issues, and you wrote me back, you wrote, I lost my lunch. I was laughing for a good while. And tell Claire hi and just keep up the good work. Because I only found you about 6 or 8 months ago. Now I listen to you every day.
All right. Well, thank you very much for the kind words. We're going to let you go and switch over to Travis in Wisconsin. Aloha, Travis. What's on your mind today?
Hey, Mike. Just wanted to say I really appreciate what you're doing. I'm not sure if you mentioned this yet or not because I just started listening to the show, but I was just wondering if you thought there was any kind of connection between Robert De Niro's interview on the Today Show and the government coming out and saying that they know Zika is dangerous for us. I just thought, I'd see that leading to forced vaccines.
Well, we know they want to do forced vaccines because it's a big moneymaker. Now, Zika virus has been around for 70 years, and it never produced microcephalic babies. What they have down in Brazil is they blamed the Zika virus, and but Brazil had also started a mandatory vaccination campaign for pregnant mothers. On the vaccine used on that little package insert, it says microcephaly is one of the known potential side effects. I saw one of the slimiest, sleaziest pieces of propaganda writing the other day where somebody came out with this article saying, you shouldn't pay attention to those package inserts. It doesn't really mean the vaccine is dangerous. It's just the lawyers insist that we put it in there, and you shouldn't look at those. They're not proof that vaccines are harmful. Well, the lawyers had a good reason for wanting to put that in there. And if you go over and you look at some of these package inserts, and they're not going to show them to you voluntarily. You have to ask your doctor or nurse, I want to see the package insert. And take a magnifying glass because it's really microscopic print on very thin paper, which they claim is just to save shipping costs. But they don't want you to read that stuff. Now, as far as Robert De Niro, I applaud him for coming on out with this interview and saying that he regrets pulling Vaxxed from the Tribeca Film Festival. He thinks there's an issue. He thinks there should be a public discussion about what's going on. And he's absolutely right. Autism rates are just skyrocketing across the country. Sudden infant death syndrome, microcephalic babies, all of this stuff. And the vaccine makers are out there saying, oh, it's the virus, it's this, it's shaken baby, it's all this other stuff. It's never us, because there's big money involved there. But there is a legitimate reason to be looking at this issue, especially with the admission from the CDC scientists who wrote their report saying there's no link between vaccines and autism, that the study was a fraud. That they created this piece of paper to match a preordained conclusion, de-link autism from vaccines because we're making too much money to stop doing what we're doing now. Okay?
All right. Well, thank you.
All right.
Interesting glimpse.
All right, we'll let you go. I mean, we know, and there's another one of these terrible stories on What Really Happened Today, where parents took their child in for a vaccine, and they said, we only want the MMR, we don't want any of the others. The kid gets the shot, is permanently damaged, and then they go back and find out that the doctor had basically signed 8 different vaccines in the same needle. Because it makes money. The doctor, the health companies, everything, they're all getting a piece of the action of this. They're financially motivated to stick that needle into your kid's arm. And, hey, if it wrecks the kid, we make more money because now you're going to need treatments for all the damage we caused. We'll be right back after our news and commercials. Okay. All right, well, it looks like, again, like we had happen just yesterday, we are cut off from GCN, so I'm going to start talking for the benefit of the BAM user audience. And what we have here, we're getting into the economy, and I realize we're getting to it late, but we get so many more phone calls, and I need to rush through some of this stuff. The Panama Papers, again, has exposed the reality that taxes are just for you little people. For you, the serfs, the proletariat, the plebes. And Oxfam is now out there slamming the World Bank for investing in firms that are using these tax havens. And apparently they discovered 51 of 68 companies doing business with World Bank funds on projects in Africa in 2015 were using tax havens. Now, Germany is in high dudgeon there. They're out there urging Britain to crack down on the overseas territory for tax haven freeloaders. David Cameron, who's caught up in his own scandal about this, is saying it's unfair to criticize British-controlled tax havens. You're not being fair. It's a sticky wicket. It's not cricket, don't you understand? Okay. Now, this leads to an article that we saw over in Russia Today where Cameron seems oblivious to this whole issue, or maybe he's just intentionally trying to ignore it and pretend it's no big deal. But apparently there is a petition calling for snap elections in Great Britain, a new election for Prime Minister, or for new election for Parliament. It's already got 100,000 signatures. Now, Jeremy Corbyn got up in the Parliament and made an amazing speech describing it as industrial-scale tax evasion for the wealthy. And he says the danger is it is revealing to the world that there is one set of laws for the ultra-rich and a completely different set of laws for the poor. It's like the return of nobility. If you're above a certain level of wealth and power, you're allowed to do things ordinary people are not, like evade taxes, or even get away with murder. Now, let's see. Over at Extra Public TV, okay, looks like we're getting our connection with GCN back. They have an article saying these tax loopholes were created for a reason. And everybody who's been caught up in the Panama Papers scandal is out there saying, well, everything we did was legal. It's the law of the land. That's the real scandal. The politicians wrote and passed laws to create these little escape hatches for them and their rich friends. And we are talking trillions of dollars that has been taken out of the economies where the money has been made or swiped. And that means that money is no longer there for investment back in the country. And, of course, the tax revenues are not being collected on that wealth and its subsequent earnings. And that means the tax burden gets dropped on you. And so we're hearing all of these politicians out there saying, oh, the debt is out of control. We have to raise taxes. The taxes have to go up. We have to keep the bankers happy. And then you find out they're writing themselves laws where they don't have to do it. Now, there's another article coming out of PatriotRising.com. At least 2/3 of all active U.S. corporations paid nothing in federal income taxes during the period from 2006 to 2012, despite an income-dependent statutory tax rate of 15% to 35%. This is coming out of the Government Accountability Office. The politicians are saying, the government is admitting this is what's going on. 2/3 of these corporations are not paying federal taxes. Now, getting on back to the, here we go. And, all right, we're back reconnected with Genesis here, and we're talking about the Panama Papers now. We're talking about the exposure that there is this global system of tax avoidance for the rich. And Jeremy Corbyn is absolutely right. We're all now seeing there's one set of laws for the ultra-rich and powerful and a completely different set of laws for the poor and working class people. Now, as more and more people get into these papers, And they get into the raw data itself. They're finding intelligence officials, agents. They're using these tax havens to move money around for nefarious purposes. And again, it's a double standard. Because right now in the U.S., I mean, if you take too much money out of the bank, they file a report. We've got to know what you're doing with your money. But all these governments and politicians and intelligence agencies, oh yeah, they've got to have a separate system. They need to hide what they're doing from the enemy, which appears to be you, the ordinary people. Now, here's where it starts to impinge on Ms. Clinton. Story coming out of freebeacon.com about a single address in Delaware at 1209 North Orange Street. It's in Wilmington, Delaware, and it is the home of 285,000 shell companies, which are taking advantage of Delaware's Panama-like secrecy rules, tax incentives, business-friendly case law. Boy, I'd hate to be sorting out the mail in that building. But it turns out this includes shell companies owned by Bill and Hillary Clinton. And they set up 2 shell companies in 2008 and 2013. Now, WJC LLC appears to be a pass-through for his consulting fees. And another company is called ZFS Holdings LLC. It was set up 1 week after Hillary Clinton left the State Department. And it's known Hillary Clinton received $5.5 million from her book publisher, Simon & Schuster, through the company. Now, Hillary's books aren't selling all that well. But that's another way that politicians can be paid off. And it looks good. They do a favor for a company or a business, and then they get a book deal. And it's out there, oh, it's an amazing book. And then 6 months later, it's in the manager's closeout bin because nobody's actually buying the thing. And again, a reminder, something I mentioned yesterday, the Federal Reserve, which is a privately owned central bank that issues all of the public currency as a loan at interest and refuses full audits, is exempt from taxes. It's in the Federal Reserve's own charter. Federal Reserve banks, including the capital stock and surplus therein, and the income derived therefrom shall be exempt from federal, state, and local taxation except taxes upon real estate. They have to pay the real estate taxes on the property that their banks sit on, but that's it. This is actually at the Federal Reserve's own website. This is from the horse's, or in this case, the pig's own mouth. They're above taxes. They're bankers. They're rich. They don't pay taxes. Taxes are for you, the little people. So cough it on up. Now, over in Minnesota, a former U.S. tax court judge and her husband have been indicted on charges they conspired to evade at least $400,000 in federal taxes. So even the people who are part of the system are out there saying, we don't have to do this stuff here. All right, getting over to the war zones. There's an article over here in Blacklisted News talking about the Fast and Furious arms trafficking in Syria. Now, I think the usage of the term Fast and Furious may be a little bit loose. Fast and Furious was supposed to be the program where the same government that tells you you're not allowed to own assault-style weapons was spending your tax dollars to send assault-style weapons to Mexican drug criminals. Kind of makes you wonder whose side they're really on. But there is no question that the U.S. government was also spending your tax dollars to send weapons and other supplies to ISIS and Al-Qaeda in Syria. Now, we were all told that ISIS and Al-Qaeda are our enemies in the war on terror. And giving aid and comfort to the enemy in time of war is the legal definition of treason. So here we have the U.S. government literally committing a treasonous act. And Hillary was neck deep in it because while she was Secretary of State, weapons were being smuggled from Libya through that consulate in Benghazi to Syria to arm these terrorist groups that we're all told are our enemies. And we have to be afraid of them. And we have to let the government spy on us and watch us all the time and monitor our bank information because ISIS is evil and ISIS is bad. And it turns out ISIS is working for the U.S. government. Now, Syrians in Syrian-controlled areas are heading to the polling stations to elect a new parliament. This is democracy. You'd think Washington, D.C. would be happy about it. But no, Washington, D.C. is already dismissing the election because it doesn't reflect the will of the people. Actually, what it doesn't reflect is the will of Washington, D.C. And so once again, we see that democracy is a good thing as long as you're voting for the people that the government wants you to vote for, like Ted Cruz and Hillary Clinton. But if you dare want to stand up and actually choose your own leaders, the election's illegitimate. We're not going to pay attention to it. Now, we know that Israel has been carrying out airstrikes in Syria, especially up around the Damascus area. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is now officially admitting that, yes, he ordered airstrikes against Syria. He claims it's to prevent Hezbollah in Syria from acquiring weapons. But it does appear that they were attempting decapitation strikes against Assad. We've got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And it's on the corporate media. They're making a big stink about how Russian planes overflew the Donald Cook again. Now, the last time it happened, the Russians were testing out some of their electronic warfare equipment and absolutely paralyzed the Aegis ship. So far, they're not saying if that happened again, but apparently the Russian planes were able to basically overfly the Donald Cook something like 20 times this time. So I think maybe the Donald Cook was once again paralyzed. Let's talk about the economy here. There's a lot of stuff going on. Worst corporate debt level since the Great Recession may hamstring the Federal Reserve debt levels. They're once again trapped in having to keep the rates down and keep pouring money all over Wall Street. It looks to me like they're trying to drive the Dow over 18,000 as an election year banner. Look how good the economy is doing. The Dow is 18,000. How could you even begin to doubt that the federal government is doing a wonderful job with the economy? Look at that Dow. Don't look at anything else. Just look at the Dow. 18. What a huge, impressive number. Very interesting article over at yahoo.com. Something just snapped in the Saudi money markets, and they're basically talking about a sudden surge in equity and FX volatility. And they're basically looking at the overnight deposit rates that all of a sudden shot up to their highest since the financial crisis in 2009. We may be looking at another meltdown. And the conclusion of Yahoo is it is clear that the stress in Saudi markets has spread from the forward derivatives markets to actual funding problems and liquidity. Saudi Arabia may decide they need their money back from the United States, and that's going to be a problem. Meanwhile, the IMF is now calling officially for negative interest rates. Now, over in Japan, when they started experimenting with negative interest rates, people started emptying their savings accounts. So I don't know what they're expecting is going to happen if the nations go along with the negative interest rates. I mean, it's almost silly to have a savings account today because the interest that you're being paid is less than the rate of inflation. So you're losing money anyway. If the interest rates go negative, you're losing it even more. You're far better off having that money under your own control, buried in a mayonnaise jar out by the pineapple plantation. And so somewhere down the road, they're going to try and ban cash completely, and they're going to outlaw private ownership of silver or gold or any other portable store of wealth. They want it all under their control to go on playing their little Ponzi scheme games. Congress is now preparing a Puerto Rico bailout. The governor of Puerto Rico has suspended debt payments. And we all know what that means. They're going to take more away from us to keep the bankers happy, because that's what government always does. All a bailout is taking money away from the people and giving it to the banks so the banks can loan it back to the people at interest. Now, the Fed just had a bailout test. 7 out of 8 major banks failed it. Only Citigroup passed this test. But that didn't stop Jamie Dimon from telling CNBC that the liquidity of J.P. Morgan is extraordinary, even though J.P. Morgan failed the bailout test. Another article about Obamacare. This is coming out of investors.com. Under Obamacare, insurers are losing money on a product people must buy. And they're going back to the situation with United Health Group. They're losing so much money under Obamacare. They're leaving 2 states. 8 of the state co-ops are now on the brink of collapse. This is your health care on government. Obamacare is a complete unmitigated disaster, which is why Obama is still trying to figure out some way he can hit you with a carbon tax. Now, here's the news that you need to copy down and send to all of your friends. Up until now, Hillary Clinton has been campaigning on a promise that tax rates are going to stay the same as they've been under Obama. And those are bad enough as it is already, where you're paying more for taxes than you pay for your housing, food, and clothing put together. Unless you're the ultra-rich. Then, of course, you're living the high life. Well, apparently, during an interview with the editorial team of the New York Daily News, Hillary Clinton admitted her tax proposals will increase taxes on the American people by at least $1 trillion with a T. Because, after all, that's all you people are good for, is giving us more money. That's your place in life, in society. So that one needs to be sent around to everybody who's a Hillary supporter. A vote for Hillary is a vote for a $1 trillion increase in taxation on you, the American people. At the same time, we are finding out that the world's ultra-rich and the politicians and the corporations don't have to pay taxes. They've crafted themselves a little sneaky little hole that they can go through, which is not available to you. All right, we're going to go ahead and grab a phone call. John in Barbados, aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Oh, Michael. Well, a couple of subjects, really. One, the economy, and one, this war in Syria. Now, although Netanyahu's come out and admitted that they've been targeting Syria, it hasn't happened since Russia moved in its Air Force and S-400.
You noticed that, did you?
Absolutely. And I also noticed, since the Russian Air Force has been there, they've actually been overflying the Golan Heights, much to Netanyahu's chagrin, but Israel doesn't seem to do anything about it. So
well, Israel, I think Israel is prudently trying to avoid open conflict directly with Russia, because with the current situation here in the United States of America, there would be no popular support whatsoever for the U.S. to go to war against Russia over Israel's attempted theft of the Golan Heights.
Anyway, so that was just one point I wanted to make. Now, the economy. When I looked at the Dow numbers and what have you today, I fell on the floor laughing.
Yes.
I mean, it's so ridiculously out of kilter with actually the earnings. And just looking at all the shutdowns of the retail outlets and the oil fracking industry going bankrupt and seeking Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection and what have you.
And, you know, and now they're out there trying to claim that they're going to revise the first quarter GDP upward despite all the earnings information. I mean, they're just trying to make it look good because the American people are beginning to realize just how much we're being lied to about the unemployment numbers. U.S. retailers are reporting falling demand for autos, both new and used. People aren't buying new clothes. People aren't going out to eat. All of these industries are in serious, serious trouble. And they're just trying to run up the Dow so they can wave it as a flag and say, see, the economy's okay. What are you all complaining about? Just sit down, shut up, vote the party ticket, and get ready to breed us more workers and soldiers.
Well, I find it really interesting that there's been all these banking meetings, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and one on Friday, with the international bankers, the IMF and Bank of International Settlements. What are they discussing? They're very tight-lipped about it, but if you look at all the oil industry frackers, they borrowed money hand over fist, and they're not getting a return.
No, they're in serious trouble. That oil price war against Russia backflashed onto the fracking industry. Anyway, John, got to let you go. We got to take a break for commercials, and we're going to go ahead and close the phone lines because I got a bunch of stories that I need to get to before the end of our program today. So we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Now, yesterday we were talking about this big stink that came up when it was found out the IRS is actually encouraging illegal immigrants to use stolen Social Security numbers in order to file tax returns. And the head of the IRS defended it, saying, well, we want these people paying taxes. Well, nobody is going to file a tax return where they have to pay more taxes. They're filing for refunds and for credits. And the IRS isn't even checking. They've actually got a link that goes over to the Social Security Administration, so they checked Social Security number, the taxpayer ID is what they call it now because there is no more Social Security, against the name. And the Social Security computer would send back, this is not a match. And the IRS is apparently ignoring that. Now we're hearing that Barack Obama is going to forgive 387,000 students of their student loan debt, declaring that they're eligible for loan forgiveness if they are permanently disabled. Sounds like a good idea, except that these 387,000 people are not required to submit documentation of their disability. Nobody's going to be checking to see if anybody is lying to be getting out of their student loan. And, of course, the student loans, if they're forgiven, that's going to place a burden on the original issuer of the loan, the underwriter, as it were. Meanwhile, we get this weird story from Edmonton about a veteran who every year has to file paperwork on his military disability to prove that his legs have not magically grown back in the previous year. So what Obama is doing, everybody knows there's a student loan bubble, there's a credit card bubble, and Obama is trying to shave down the student loan default rate to make the U.S. economy look better. But while this is the usual slipshod government work, the core idea actually has merit. It is time to start writing off debt on the people if there's going to be any chance of saving the economy as a whole. It's time for a modern-day jubilee. Write off all the debt across the board and reset the system. Because the other alternative is chaos. No Ponzi scheme system ever lasts. They always end in a gigantic crash. Now, the housing and urban development people are threatening to sue landlords who screen tenants for felonies. And they're claiming that because more minorities are involved in felony crimes, that screening tenants for felony violations is a racist thing and has to be blocked. Now, it's time for some common sense here. 3 years ago, living right here where you're watching me on the BAM user camera, we had drug criminals literally living on both sides of us in the adjoining units. There was drug sales, drug manufacturing, all kinds of crime. It was an absolute mess. And I think people who want to build a safe neighborhood for themselves and for their children do have a right to screen out people with past crime histories. Now, I want to modify that by saying that not everybody with a felony record is still a criminal. Some people turn their lives around. The individual who was living over in this next unit over there did that. Served his jail time, cleaned up, and the last time I saw him, he was looking good and doing well and moving on with his life, and I wouldn't actually object to him moving back in and being a neighbor again, especially because they had great kids who loved science experiments and everything. But yeah, I think at some point we have to understand that our government has lost its common sense. They're too politically correct. They can't function anymore. Okay, let me see. I'm going to skip on down here past some of these other things. All right, here we go. Over in Europe, the IMF is coming under serious criticism for scaremongering claims that if Britain exits the European Union, it is going to cause a serious financial crash in Britain and all across Europe. The counter-argument is the country of Guernsey, which you may be forgiven for not having heard about. It's a little tiny country, and it is not part of the European Union, and they are doing very well. So there's a lot of fear-mongering going on. Now, in response to David Cameron's spending of vast sums of British tax money to mount the fear-mongering campaign, major Tory donors are getting together, and they're funding a grassroots campaign to support leaving the European Union, and they have already put in something like £5 million into the Brexit campaign to fight back against all the lies and deceptions. If Great Britain leaves the European Union and is then followed by France, which is talking about it, Denmark, which is talking about it, Germany's already talking about it, then the whole European Union concept falls apart, and it's been destroyed from within by the European Central Bank and the immigration crisis. It's already falling apart, and that was supposed to be a major stepping stone to the global New World Order. And that's why they're trying so hard to keep Great Britain in there. And I'm predicting when the referendum happens, there's going to be massive, visible, obvious election fraud. Trying to keep Britain enslaved to the European Central Bank, because that's the goal of the private central banks. All of us are their debt slaves for as long as we shall live, until the sun swallows the earth billions of years in the future. That's their goal. George Soros is warning Europe they must absorb another 500,000 refugees at an estimated cost of $34 billion or risk an existential threat, which he's not clear what that means. So I have an idea. All the refugees should be put on properties owned by George Soros. His home, his office. He's got plenty of room. He's very rich. He's got a lot of room. He could take in all these refugees and stop inconveniencing the people of Europe. I think it's a great idea. Let's see him put his money where his mouth is. Now, over in Germany, they're talking about this situation where this comedian is demanding that Merkel prosecute this comedian who read a satirical, insulting poem on the air. And there actually is a law in Germany against insulting a foreign leader. Now, it's selectively enforced in this case because, as I illustrated on my website, with all these photos of these amazing parade floats that you see in Germany, they don't hesitate about insulting leaders of other countries. And that's fine. I think that should be protected speech. I think that law in Germany is silly. But they're selectively enforcing it. The problem is Merkel is now in a serious corner, because if she tells Erdogan to go jump in a lake, German-Turkish relations will deteriorate further. But if she goes along with Erdogan, she's going to lose the support of her own people, because there is a tremendous anti-Turkish sentiment going on in Germany right now. In fact, up in Frankfurt, there was a clash between police and anti-Turkey protesters. Everybody's sick and tired of this union, this rush to the New World Order. Now, we've been having a huge protest here in Washington, D.C., the Democracy Spring. I am so glad it has not gone violent, that they didn't have agent provocateurs, but it is obvious this protest is being ignored by the establishment media. 400 people have been arrested, a lot of them old people, retirees. And the stated agenda of Democracy Spring is it's time to get the big money out of politics. And the reason the establishment media is ignoring this protest is because they share in the profits when big money distorts politics. Because where does that money go? Advertising, campaign advertising, newspaper ads, TV ads, radio ads. They're raking in the dough. That's a big part of their annual operating budget. And they don't want anybody questioning if allowing unfettered purchase of our government by the wealthy is an issue, because, hey, they'd be cutting off their own income here. Okay, let's see. Let me skip on down here. Actually, we're coming up on a commercial break here. When we come on back, we're going to be talking about the USS Liberty. We're going to talk about human-caused global warming, various other issues. These are crazy, crazy times. They're absolutely crazy times. So we're going to take a break for commercials. We'll be back with the last segment of our program after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. Last segment of our program on this Wednesday. And so let's hit the inevitable human-caused global warming. As you know, the central states and New England area, a lot of snow these last few days. Now it's the Northwest's turn. Late week rain, mountain snow to ramp up across northwestern U.S. Story here, models predict huge snow for Fort Collins, Colorado. And down in Wiley, Texas, they had a hailstorm with hailstones up to 10 centimeters in diameter. That's gargantuan. And it caused a tremendous amount of damage to homes and cars. I remember one time, many, many years ago, I was down in Australia, and I saw one of their intense hailstorms, and there was this little church with all the stained glass windows, every one of them knocked out. I figure the priest was probably doing bad things with the altar boys, and that's why they got punished here, or something like that. And we're still seeing all these news stories. Every one of these weather reports come out and say, yeah, we're getting snow tonight, but next week it's going to be above normal temperatures because we all know the world is warming. And then, of course, 3 days later, more snow. Yeah, we're getting more snow. But in another couple of days, we're going to have above average temperatures. And they're still trying to push this thing. There's another article we linked to WhatReallyHappened.com saying, oh, the sea levels are rising. They're rising dramatically, and it's all the fault of greenhouse gas emissions. There isn't anything else in the universe that could be affecting sea level. They're getting hysterical. And the reason is obvious. Obamacare has been a complete and utter failure, both in its overt purpose of providing affordable health care to the American people and in its actual covert purpose of forcing us all to buy much more expensive health insurance policies out of which the government would get new tax revenues. Well, neither of those worked out. So now, as soon as they're sure that the snow has really quit this year, we're going to get oh, the world is warming, and it's climate change, and we're going to prosecute anybody who doubts us, and you've got to pay a carbon tax. I guarantee you, probably right after the November elections, may not even wait that long, but they'll be pushing for that. Now, we've been talking about how recently special interest groups are lobbying and threatening film festivals to shut down movies that threaten certain corporate profitability. We've been talking about Vaxxed, and over at Natural News, they have a very long article about how censorship of medical truth has reached a fever pitch because the corrupt medical establishment is trying to silence the growing number of films and books about cancers and vaccines and GMO. They don't want you to know. They're making money selling you dangerous products. And they make more money because the products are dangerous. They didn't spend the money to make the products safe. We'll just put the dangerous product out there and we'll hire public relations firms to convince you it's all your own imagination. Now, as I mentioned earlier in the program, Robert De Niro has given an interview in which he regrets pulling the vaccine documentary Vaxxed from the Tribeca Film Festival. And he was out there on the Today Show saying there's something out there. And it needs to be talked about, and people should see it. And he said he has a child with autism. He wants to know the truth. Autism rates have skyrocketed. At the same time, we see this constant increase in the number of mandatory vaccinations. Now, this is a story I mentioned obliquely earlier in the show. This is from backtruth.com. And the story starts back in 1993 when Jody Merchant was 14 months old and her parents took her to the Aldermore Surgery Health Clinic in Southampton, Great Britain, to get the MMR vaccine only. They consented for Dr. Allison Hill, the general practitioner and head of the clinic, to administer to their 14-month-old child the MMR vaccine only. They refused the DTaP vaccine and all others. This was a signed document. You have consent for the one vaccine. So the nurse comes in, got a syringe, single syringe, injected the kid. The kid started screaming and been permanently harmed. And the parents found out years later that the doctor had changed the order and ordered the nurse to inject this 14-month-old kid with MMR2 plus DPT plus oral polio plus HIV vaccine all in one syringe. 8 dangerous vaccines in one cocktail. Now, nobody does research on what happens when you mix these vaccines together. And these are very complex chemicals. You don't know that they're not interacting with each other. So it is amazing. Now, there's another article. This is out of Daily Mail over in Great Britain. We've been hearing a lot about statins. They were the champion drug. They're going to save people's lives with health problems. And then comes to find out statins were actually killing people. And as it turns out, there were a lot of patients being given statins who said that their muscles were hurting. It was causing pain. Oh, no, it's in your head. It's the Zika, the mosquitoes causing the muscle pain. Well, now it's been acknowledged. Statins do cause muscle pain. Remember the story we reported earlier in the week? They did a research onto the 2014-2015 flu vaccine, found out not only was it not effective, the evidence seems to indicate it was actually spreading the disease. And we know that's also a very common situation. Every time they're talking about an outbreak of pertussis or mumps, oh, look, all these people are getting sick. That's why you should get the vaccine. Then you find out all the people down with the illness have the vaccine. And when you're given an attenuated live pathogen vaccination, you are shedding this into the environment. You are, in fact, infecting other people around you. But it's a great moneymaker. Oh, wow, look at all these sick people. We're going to make money, 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 money. Now, Japan is getting ready for a planned, meaning they've run out of room release, of water contaminated with tritium from the Fukushima plant. Now, the tritium, which is a form of hydrogen, is bonded with the oxygen in the water. It's not like it's floating free. And they're still having to throw 300 tons of water every single day to keep the reactors cool. And it's leaking into the ocean. Now, there is a little bit of an opportunity here, because tritium in its gaseous state is one of the most valuable materials in the world. It's used in gun sights, watch dials, emergency lights, and so forth. And yes, it's radioactive. It's a beta emitter. But it's a lot safer outside your body, possibly strapped to your wrist or on your hunting rifle, than in the water and food you're ingesting. Remember, your skin is very protective. Alpha radiation can't get through there at all. Alpha radiation, very weak. Beta radiation, well, you don't want to have it against your forehead on a permanent basis. It's the gamma radiation that is the most dangerous. But all of it is dangerous if you ingest it or inhale it, because then you're contaminated. And we're not talking about a short-term exposure to radiation. We're talking about particles in your body emitting and emitting and emitting and emitting. It's an engraved invitation to cancer and leukemia. And Fukushima is a disaster, and now we're hearing their other reactors are showing problems. They weren't taking care of the infrastructure. They were too busy making themselves rich and playing empire across the globe here. Up in Oregon, a man has been sentenced to prison for collecting rainwater on his own property. That's the state of dictatorship we're in right now. Now, when I was a kid, having a rain barrel on the downspout, that was just common sense. It gave you a source of water for planting. It was pure. It didn't have chemicals in there, and it was accepted practice. And the new attitude now is the government owns the rain. That's not your rain. We're just allowing it to fall on your property, but you're not allowed to collect it up. And they sent this guy to jail. Apparently, there's been a big protest near Homan Square in Chicago. You know, the Abu Ghraib of Illinois. And it got really kind of angry. And all of a sudden, the word Bastille keeps running through my mind. I wonder why. There's the music. Time for me to get on out of here. I got to do some things with my lady love this afternoon. We'll be back tomorrow, Thursday, here on the Genesis Communication Network. Until then, stay informed, stay skeptical, make good choices, share what you know with who you know. Thanks to everybody who's donating to keep us up and running as all of our equipment starts to fall apart. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.